Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Edson Barbosa of getting fucked up on brunch mimosas. Jack Slack, and it's the Jack Slack Boicast episode 2. Yeah, we got some important fights to hit on this week. So for the non-boy section of this podcast, I'll focus on the big one, which is, of course, we've got the UFC coming up, and it's Edson Barbosa versus Giga Chikadze. And so we're going to be talking about Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley, everybody. um, I'll probably touch on both. But Jake Paul, do people still say they're Jake Paulers? I'm going to say that I'm based in Jake Pilled because I love that he's constantly talking about how underpaid the UFC fighters are. I think it's great. I think, the fighters themselves have proven that they aren't smart enough to realize that they are in the same position as NFL, NBA, MLB players were before they established an association. So they will not establish an association. So the only way we're going to get fighters paid more is by people like Cannonier coming out and saying, I'm not happy with how much I've been paid, or people begging for bonuses on main cards on live TV. As Cannonier himself said this week, the payout does not match the brand. That's the issue here. If you want to keep selling yourself as the most successful fight company in the world, and then as a business touting your amazing returns, we're going to draw attention to the absolute dog shit state of your pay. But with Jake Paul saying it, you're going to get the unfortunate side effect that it turns a lot of fighters into Sam Alvey. Old Capo Sam, as they call him. He's, Jake Paul saying this, people don't like the messenger. So the fighters will be like, no, I like being a few bad months away from homelessness. But, every every other interview that Jake Paul does that's not specifically about UFC fighter pay, he comes across as an arse. But that's the whole point. The man has found a way to game the boxing system. I mean, he's doing exactly what Floyd Mayweather did. Aside from the fact that Floyd Mayweather was an Olympic champion. Oh, no, he wasn't an Olympic champion, was he? He went to the Olympics. But aside from the fact that Floyd Mayweather was an incredibly accomplished amateur, fought the best fighters in the world as a pro, that wasn't what made Floyd Mayweather money. Floyd Mayweather could have not fought the best and made money because Floyd Mayweather had worked out the magic secret, which is if you talk a mad amount of shit, people will tune in to watch you lose. And it worked so well for about 2 decades. I mean, it's still working. Like, this is the crazy thing. People are still tuning in to Mayweather versus Logan Paul or Mayweather versus... Like, there weren't that many people who'd never seen Floyd Mayweather fight before when they watched Mayweather versus Pacquiao or when they watched Mayweather versus Logan Paul. And they were still shocked that this man wasn't going after a finish. That's not who Floyd Mayweather is. Floyd Mayweather is maintaining the perfect record and then selling that by being like, oh, maybe someone will beat me, but I don't know, I'm pretty hateable. I mean, the alleged beating of women and things like that, not necessary to the brand, but certainly helped. But yes, that's Jake Paul's thing. You tune in because you're like, I hope he loses. And he did it against a YouTuber, and then he did it against another YouTuber, and then he did it against Nate Robinson, and then he did it against Ben Askren, and he, like, idiots were going, well, Ben Askren was an Olympian, so I think he knows a bit about boxing, or I think he can be a pretty elite boxer if he's only training for boxing. See, that's what was holding him back. The last 10 years, he was having to train other martial arts. And you're like, no, I've watched Ben Askren training striking for the last 10 years. He's not good at it. And most importantly, he doesn't have any power. When everything else is equal and you just talk about no-skill bums fighting each other, the one that can actually land hard punches will win. And it's the same, the same is true when you're talking about women's MMA, to be honest. Amanda Nunes punches really hard and lands them, she will win. Ben Askren has never punched hard in his life. Jake Paul actually punches pretty hard. You can say anything you want about Jake Paul and the shit state of the matchmaking and stuff like that, but 1, he's got an okay jab. 2, he's got a great right hand. 3, he knows how to land that right hand. The standard Jake Paul procedure is to come out with a jab, bounce back, and throw the right hand as the opponent comes on. If you watch the knockdowns against Nate Robinson, that's exactly what that was. He has a good right hand, he uses the jab, he gets the guy walking towards him and walking onto the right hand. And it's that simple. Honestly, I think there was more believability in Nate Robinson having the potential to be a decent boxer than there was for Ben Askren, because you'd watched Ben Askren box for 10 years. Nate Robinson, you had to actually seek out the footage of him on the pads and go, oh, that's bad. That's really bad. However, some of these, celebrity boxing matches or YouTuber boxing matches or whatever, they surprise me with how people think. Like, lots of people thought Ben Askren would win, and I was going, no, he's terrible at boxing. And very, very hittable. But now a lot of people are completely convinced that Tyron Woodley is no threat at all, which, he is shot, like as a fighter, he's shot, but I don't know if he's that much of a walkover. And then the same, when they were talking about doing Logan Paul versus Anderson Silva, they opened betting lines for it, and Anderson Silva was the underdog by quite a large amount. It was very strange. I mean, the fight was never actually booked in the end, but they opened betting lines for it. But Logan Paul, if you've watched the two of them fight, Jake Paul can punch, Logan Paul can't. Jake Paul can set things up, Logan Paul can't. Logan Paul is the big muscly one who has no gas tank at all and just sort of leans on people. And Anderson Silva was coming off this win over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., a guy who, despite being a massive fail son, can box pretty bloody well compared to the majority of the population. Compared to the majority of boxers. Actually, I've just remembered that I've got a poll running on my Twitter at the moment. I put up a question, who is more legit or less unlegit? Jake Paul's boxing career, which is more legit? Jake Paul's boxing career, Dylan Dennis's MMA career. Currently, with 825 votes in, Jake Paul's boxing career, 75%, Dylan Dennis's MMA career, 25%. Because every time I see Dylan Dennis commenting and after a fight with Jake Paul, I'm like, oh yeah, where is he? I don't know, was he injured? I don't know, but the level of competition they're matching with him with in Bellator, if he's any good as a prospect, he should be able to beat them on one leg, Don't care if you've blown out your ACL, get back in action. But anyway, Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley, back to that shit. Tyron Woodley, obviously, we're all very down on him because we've watched him lose 16 rounds back to back, or was it 17? But yeah, he lost 5 rounds against Kamaru Usman doing nothing. He lost 5 rounds against Colby Covington doing nothing. He lost 5 rounds against Gilbert Burns doing nothing. And then he got knocked out by Vicente Luque in what was ultimately a very courageous performance, I thought. He had his... I was going to say he's got his back to the wall or had his back to the wall. But literally his whole game was putting his back to the wall and then not doing anything. But he figuratively had his back to the wall with the UFC. And he decided to come out and actually throw. And he did it against the most dangerous of them in terms of counter-punching ability. Vicente Luque is probably the best counter-fighter or offensive counter-puncher in maybe MMA, definitely the welterweight division. But in that fight, he came out and he threw 1-2 off the bat, clinched up. Every time they broke, it was just 1-2, 1-2. And he actually stumbled Luque with a good right hand at one point, which obviously Luque, amazing chin. Don't really know how Jake Paul's chin is. But the thing about that fight was that what got Woodley stunned was just pumping out jabs and then throwing the right hand immediately afterwards. And then he double jabbed forwards and walked on to a drop away right hand. The exact same sort of punch that Jake Paul has basically made his career out of. Just jab, drop away, right hand as they come in. And of course, that fight was finished by a D'Arce choke, which of course Jake Paul isn't going to be doing in this one. We've done all the bollocks around it just for a laugh, but if we're talking strategies, for Paul, you've got to be very conscious of the right hand coming back. Nobody that Paul has fought can hit like Woodley and has provably hit like Woodley. Hit like Woodley. It's one thing to have decent power on the mitts or whatever. Nate Robinson, I'm sure, was decently explosive, but Tyron Woodley has actually timed a lot of good fighters with a good right hand and has booming power. So with Jake Paul, hopefully, unless Woodley's completely shot, you'll have to see a bit more cautious and thoughtful of an approach from Jake Paul in this fight. I think for Woodley, don't sit with your back on the ropes. There's not an awful lot to be gained there. Maybe he catches him coming in. Actually, fuck it. Try it for a round. If you've got time, you might as well try it against this very green boxer. I mean, obviously he had more professional fights than more professional boxing matches than Tyron Woodley, but I imagine Tyron Woodley is the much more experienced in terms of years training, things seen, actual people in sparring trying to take his head off. So yeah, take a round like that. But the thing with Woodley is that he gets trapped in like this passive mode, and Dean Thomas is just going throw combinations, and he never does. But I think for Woodley, pressuring forwards is probably a good idea. And I'm saying pressuring very carefully there because, again, Jake Paul's best punch so far has been dropping away and landing the right hand as the opponent comes in. So if Woodley's just pumping jabs and running after him, as he often does, that's not good for him. For Paul, if Woodley stays on the ropes and does nothing like he is wont to do, still got to be real careful. You don't want to get caught with the right hand coming in. So jabs and body jabs, which he does a lot, and then the odd right hand. And then the other thing that I quite liked, like I've said before, Jake Paul quite impressed me in terms of like actually knowing what to do. Because Logan Paul clearly doesn't. Logan Paul's just there to like pump hands. But Jake Paul, if you watch him, he will go to the clinch and not just when he's hurt. He will smother people. So he'll go like, he'll throw a big right hand and then he'll duck into the clinch before the opponent comes back. And that is a really good sign for an intelligent sort of boxing performance. That's the sort of thing you want to do against someone like Tyron Woodley, who is still very much a threat if he hits you on the chin, if he hits you with that right hand. So if you're going towards him on the fence, poke him with jabs where he's not really going to be able to get back at you, and then throw the right hand and duck into the clinch immediately afterwards. That would be my ideal strategy there for Jake Paul. One of the big issues for Jake Paul is that he doesn't have much of a left hook. He is very much just a jab and a right hand, and the jab isn't amazing either. But at any rate, I believe Woodley's an underdog, so maybe a couple of quid to be made on him. I don't think he's as dead a dog as people seem to think he is. But I would probably still favour Paul in terms of actual competency in a boxing ring, or demonstrated competency in a boxing ring, and also just because of Tyron Woodley's decline. However, if there's ever a time that Tyron Woodley finds his confidence again, I imagine it's going to be in the jump from fighting absolute murderers. As much as he's washed at the highest levels of competition. He's not washed fighting some dude who has never really been hit properly before in a match. So yeah, I mean, it's actually quite intriguing because this isn't like the Ben Askren thing and the Nate Robinson thing, like the YouTuber versus elite athlete, YouTuber versus MMA fighter. This is actually like, a guy who's got much more attention than he should as a boxer, but, decently competent for someone who took it up so late, against an actual world-class fighter who's pretty scary still. So anyway, let's talk about the UFC main event, because I spent a while ranting about that bollocks there.